Yes. Yes. Just four. Four is all I'm really. We're looking at the right of self-determination and why people do things. Why you should form a new government. Rather than trying to fix an old one where you have no right to redress because you're not signatory. What I want to do while you're trying to fix this, Ray, where you can hear me better, is go ahead and explain from a contract position exactly what goes on with forming a declaration or forming a constitution. All right, I'm on page 5. We've shown the paddle for case and also 2 declarations where it talks about men signing on to a compact, being a party to a compact, forming a new government if the one that they're part of doesn't serve them. And when I say a part of, in this case, I'm talking about belonging to, not actually being the one that set it up. Under the law of nations, it was called the right of self-exile. You still there?
Yes.
Okay. Today, that right of self-exile is called the right of self-determination. But the point is, thinking about contract law, Ray, what we have to look at is, if men come together, like if the U.S. didn't exist and you and I lived in the same neighborhood, the same area, and there was 50 families, just like old Indian tribes and Hebrew tribes or whatever, when people come together to form their community, they sit down and actually either sign and write up or talk about and agree to how it is they're going to run the community, what the laws are going to be, who's going to, if there's a disagreement over contracts, if there's a disagreement over property. You have to have some kind of means of settling disputes. That's just the way cultures are. But you also have to have a means of supporting that culture, whether it's through tithes or taxation or pledges or whatever people want to call it. Now, if you and I sat down with 48 other families and we drafted up a declaration, this is our community, we're going to call it Rayville, and in Rayville, this is the declaration, and here we drafted up a charter or a constitution of how we're going to run things. Now, along comes another party, and they say, I have a right to your constitution. Do they have a right to our constitution?
No.
Okay. I mean, another family decides they want to move in. We get to choose and decide whether or not we want them to move in, right?
They're not signatories of our Constitution.
Right, and we don't know whether they're going to keep any agreements with us or not, so how do we know if we want them in the community? The point is, when we all signed that document, that became our intellectual property. We own it, we control it. It's no different than any other contract. You could take a real estate contract where 2 people are signed to transfer title equity on a property, and a third party comes along and says, well, I think I'd like to live in the upstairs bedroom. Well, where's their contract right? Same thing with declarations, same thing with compacts and constitutions. I don't fall for what allegedly is put into history. I see things for the way they are, because the way it's run right now tells me the way things were back then. They just keep saying, don't bring that Constitution into my courtroom. Why? Because this is my courtroom, not yours. It was right in the Paddleford case in 1854. You are not a party to the Constitution. Quit bringing it up. And by the way, when you do, you're trespassing across their intellectual property rights. You're guilty of breaching international treaty law over international copyrights and trademarks, and therefore you're the tortfeasor and you're going to jail, period. Okay? And it's right.
It makes perfect sense to look at organizations that have failed. Because you see that they were doing nothing more than protecting their property, their rights.
Well, and the rights of the posterity that they work for, and enforcing international treaty. And copyrights are part of international treaty law, period.
Thinking that they were being treated unfairly.
Well, I won't disagree that there's misrepresentation going on, but again, I go back to where does the responsibility lie? The Father said, return to me and I'll return to you. So people got to return back to truth. They got to return back to some intelligence and understanding. It behooves us to read what these people have been writing, because these people have been doing it right. Look at it. This is the Jamestown Exposition by Roosevelt. Men can never escape being governed. They must either govern themselves or they must submit to being governed by others. If from lawlessness or fickleness, what is fickleness? That's your unwillingness to pledge after you learn the truth, to set up your own government, your own community, come together as a people of like mind, to pledge to declarations and principles and concepts that you can believe in. Because, see, I don't believe in the concepts here. I'm not for abortion. I'm just not. And that's just one issue. I'm not going to get into tons of issues. It doesn't matter. There's a philosophical difference there, and it says that as long as those differences are held within certain parameters, they're actually wholesome. So I have a disagreement. And so for that reason, I'm going to look at it and choose to go govern myself in a different manner. And that's exactly what they're saying here. So if it's from lawlessness, fickleness, or folly, or self-indulgence, they've refused to govern themselves, then most assuredly in the end they will have to be governed from the outside. That's the way it is. The sovereign cannot make excuses for his failures. The sovereign must accept the responsibility for the exercise of the power that inheres in him. And that power means, in the world of the law of nations, you got a right to self-exile, but you don't have a right to tell us what to do. We're exercising our stewardship and our sovereignty the way we want to. If you want to do yours, then go somewhere else to do it, or go form it. We'll live on the same planet. We'll live on the same dirt. You know, the Indian tribes are here in the U.S., or actually the U.S. is here on the Indian tribes, or whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. All the nations of Europe at one time were not nations of Europe. It was like one big landmass. Okay, so people can peacefully coexist. They're now setting up things called intergovernmental organizations, or IGOs, and it's not even necessary to have dirt. The UN itself is an IGO, and everybody that works for the UN, that works for that IGO, has diplomatic immunity as belonging to a body called an intergovernmental organization. As a matter of fact, they have unlimited state jurisdiction according to the rules of IGOs. That's powerful stuff. So the sovereign can't make excuses.